Good day to everyone. On behalf of everyone here at SCS Consulting Services, I want to thank you for joining us today and welcome you to the webinar. So today we are talking about planning tips for a successful CDP reporting cycle this year. I'm your host, Bonnie Holman, Managing Director of SCS Consulting Services in the USA. Before we dive into our presentation, I'd like to take a moment to update all of you on our event platform, GoToWebinar, and really how to engage with the speakers during the webinar. So to avoid any unnecessary background noises, all attendees are muted. However, if you would like to engage with the speakers, we do encourage you to do so as well. You may submit questions during the course of the webinar. To do so, please go to the question section in the control panel on the upper right-hand side of your webinar console. And then once you type your question in and hit send, it will be sent to the operations panel for review. And then depending on the time, we will make every effort to answer all the questions during the webinar. So either as we're moving from one section to another or else at the end of the webinar. And then any questions that we're unable to answer during the webinar will respond via email afterwards. Today's presentation is also being recorded, and a link to the recording will be made available to the registrants and attendees typically 1 to 2 days after the webinar. Since we do have a long weekend coming up, you might expect that Tuesday of next week. We also encourage you to provide your feedback on the webinar, so we have a quick survey for you at the end of the presentation. Just a disclaimer, so really the intent of the disclaimer is that this webinar is really informational only and does not take the place of any legal or financial advice, nor is the webinar intended to take the place of research. So the intent of the disclaimer is really that this webinar is also not intending to take the place of any consulting or advisory specifically around CDP and your company's performance. I am joined today by Stephanie Ellis. She is one of our teammates and our resident CDP guru. And then the agenda today, we are going to be offering some practical information and tips to really help support your 2025 CDP reporting cycle. We'll walk through information regarding CDP as a system and changes from the previous reporting cycles. And we'll provide tips for improving scoring, improving performance, and how you can leverage strategy to support that across a multi-year time frame. So let's get started with CDP and the reporting cycle. We'll do a quick review of CDP as an organization, some recent changes, and really the benefits of leveraging CDP in your sustainability efforts. So in 2025, CDP is celebrating its 25th year. And over the past 25 years, the nonprofit has really grown to become the largest global disclosure system for environmental impacts. It's used by investors, companies, cities, states, governments, and nonprofit institutions. In 2024, there were 24,800 plus companies that disclosed to CDP. And that's actually representing an increase of close to 3,000 companies from the prior year. What that means is CDP continues to gain traction globally, which is reflected by some of the other data that you see in this slide. So the 24,800 companies represent over 2/3 of global market capitalization, with 93% of the FTSE 100 and 85% of the S&P 500. Requests for companies to report, supply chain companies and companies seeking investment is increasing as well. So while over 24,800 companies did disclose, in actuality in 2024, over 31,500 companies were requested to do so. And this request was made by over 640 capital market signatories. Additionally, over 330 companies leverage the CDP system and the requester function to engage their supply chain and their suppliers to utilize CDP to report critical supply chain information. CDP data and scores are also used by over 700 financial institutions, and these represent really a quarter of global institutional assets. So the decision useful data provided really powers data markets, indices and ratings, investment research, and financial products for these institutions. And CDP, as we kind of noted, has some real benefits for supply chain and investor relations. The CDP disclosure system offers really a mechanism for companies to engage their supply chain on the critical environmental topics and receive, aggregate, analyze, and really better understand their supply chain impacts. Scope 3 value chain emissions is a clear example of this, where disclosing supply chain members have reported 43 million tons of emission reduction since 2023. So that's over a 2-year time frame. As we mentioned before, really critical for investor relations. CDP is part of the pre-IPO review process for NASDAQ and has also been referenced over 900 times in the public comment period preceding the SEC's climate rule, which of course is on pause, and the alignment with the IFRS S2 standard, which we'll talk about in a moment, kind of underpins that connection between CDP, the SEC climate rule that of course was passed and now is on pause, and other financial investment considerations. So some of you might be familiar with some pushback and perhaps what has been termed some issues and some scoring collapse that has happened in the 2024 reporting year. So if your company experienced decreases or changes in your scores from your expectations, you might have experienced this directly. If you have not yet reported to CDP but anticipate doing so, you might have heard about some system transformations and really some obstacles that companies experienced. So we want to spend a few minutes to kind of digest this and really provide some tips for folks as they're moving forward into the 2025 cycle. So when we look at what happened in 2024, the major driver of scoring changes and really score decreases across the board was really tied to these 4 aspects. So system transformation, this really gets into the how. How did this happen? CDP in the past had 3 questionnaires, one for climate, one for water, one for forest. And 2024 marked the year where they integrated into one questionnaire. This really just resulted in a greater degree of changes than I think was communicated publicly and possibly than was even expected by CDP. So combining climate, water, and forest and overlaying those sector requirements, really marked a significant change. And so anytime there's a significant change, there's going to be an outcome in the results. The climate questions in particular changed quite a bit to align to the IFRS S2 standard. And while the overall topics might not have changed from the prior alignment to TCFD, the explicit level of detail or the focus of certain questions had major changes, specifically asking for data associated with actions or outcomes for which companies had not necessarily been tracking to as closely. And then finally, the technology platform changed. And so this change might have exacerbated meeting some of the core technical changes to the questionnaire structure. And there were some technology issues that occurred during the reporting cycle that may have caused incomplete reporting. And this relates to kind of the question and the scoring changes as well. And so the what and the where. What really changed? The introduction of essential criteria was communicated in spring of 2024. And this essential criteria, Stephanie will get into a little bit later in the webinar, but essentially the 2024 reporting cycle is tracking to actions and reporting out progress taken in 2023. So companies simply were not aware of the implications of the essential criteria and how it might have related to their prior scoring and their expectations around scoring. And then in terms of the technology platform, these questions related and tied to essential criteria were not visually flagged within the technology portal. And so this, might have just resulted in a lack of awareness. The CDP scoring methodology also had to change substantially since the questionnaire did. And so this relates to, timing and process as well. So timing, when did companies kind of learn and see kind of the detailed information of the changes in 2024? For example, the scoring methodology that included really the details on the essential criteria was released on July 10th. So companies were well within the reporting process, and so this timing, really provides little to no time to incorporate changes into strategy. Certainly the opportunity to do that moving forward, but not looking backwards. The questions were released on May 22nd, and so customers were already requesting suppliers to report at that time. The good news here is that by comparison in 2025, there's not a lot of additional changes that from what occurred last year, and the focus is really on kind of providing the time and the process for companies to really integrate the drastic changes made last year and focus on, really leaning into ensuring that the online portal is functioning as anticipated. This year, for example, the scoring methodology was released in late April, and so companies are already seeing that there's time to integrate all the information into their process. I should note that the scoring methodology and the reporting guidance, these are documents that are 500 plus pages. And so, there is also just, a real hurdle there for individual companies to have the time and the effort to really digest and understand, such dense documents and be able to apply them. Okay, on communication and outcomes, CDP, made many changes in the 2024 reporting cycle, and those changes went into effect immediately. And this is something that I think folks might not quite understand the difference, but CDP is a reporting framework and not a standard. But it is used by many companies in similar ways. So standard systems by contract, when they make major changes, they tend to launch these along a longer time frame and really kind of pilot those changes. What this does is it allows the system to understand where there might be larger swings in performance and be able to get ahead of like the communication and the rollout of these. CDP, by contrast, kind of integrates the key environmental questions that are really required by decision makers globally. And so when those changes are made, those outcomes and those results are going to be felt immediately and with less kind of lead time. The release of the scores of 2024 happened in February 2025, so it was at that time that many companies were blindsided by what they experienced in terms of a reduction in their score. And so what this really kind of leads to is a call to action for 2025. Companies are able to really integrate the changes that were made last year, understanding there's not a lot of changes this year, and really begin to integrate actions into a strategy for improved scores in 2026 and beyond. And the reason I say 2026 and beyond is that in 2025, scores can be improved really using, the actions and the progress made last year and the scoring methodology and having kind of deep understanding of the guidance. But what's ultimately required to understand and integrate the essential criteria is looking forward on a 1 to 3 year time frame. And really, as you might already know, CDP plays a unique role at the intersection of sustainable finance and corporate sustainability reporting, in that it offers a unified system for aggregating the reporting needs of multiple different standards and frameworks. And in doing so, additionally, it's able to produce significant data analysis opportunities from its comprehensive disclosure database. So CDP does align to many of these standards and frameworks that you see on the screen here. I mentioned the full alignment that occurred in 2024 to the IFRS S2 standard, and maybe what I'll just hit on this slide is that this alignment, particularly in 2025, provides a unique opportunity for companies to really utilize CDP as an on-ramp towards meeting the California climate laws, specifically SB 261, which is the climate risk reporting law, and which will see companies needing to publish climate risk reports by January 1st, 2026. Additionally, for companies falling under SB 253, the CDP climate module already is a comprehensive reporting framework for reporting out scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And then here's a quick view of the dates for the 2025 reporting cycle. And I'm going to pass it over to Stephanie to get us going on the next section.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bonnie. Yeah, take a quick look at these dates. As of today, the guidance and the scoring methodology documents have been released in the PDF format for download. Coming next will be deadlines for requesters to submit who in their supply chain they would like to respond to CDP. And then the reporting window will start opening for everybody in their CDP portal starting in June 16th. So definitely pay attention to some of these dates, and then when the response window opens for scoring or for unscored submissions. So I want to move forward to start discussing the questionnaires and the themes and the details and that we think you need to know for this reporting cycle. We'll start with a quick review of the integrated full questionnaire and how it is structured. So this is the same as last year when they made the big shift to an integrated format from the 3 separate questionnaire structure. So reporting will continue forward in this more streamlined manner. And the good news is that CDP specifically did not want to make any major changes this year to any of the modules, and the slight changes they are making to the questionnaire is to improve clarity and usability within the portal. So that's great. CDP's goal of keeping things simple this year does extend to the scoring methodology, which we'll review in more detail later to dig through, what you should know there. But a sneak peek into that, and I know everyone is dying to know, is that plastics and biodiversity modules still will remain unscored. So with that, all responders to the full questionnaire will see these modules, and of course CDP would like you to disclose information to them. A couple items here for special request items like the supply chain questions or questions specific to RE100 members. Disclosures will continue to be shown these questions throughout each module as is relevant to those module topics. Companies can also continue to expect to see the integrated questions in all modules for their specific sector, except for the environmental performance modules, which will include distinct sections and questions for each of these environmental themes and from a sector perspective. And then just to call out our financial services sector friends, if any are on the call with us, you'll also continue to disclose in an integrated manner and continue to have that separate module, so that's module 12, to dig into more focused questions only relevant to your financial sector. So expect to see questions about portfolio values, portfolio emissions, environmental impacts of portfolios, etc. So let's dig into um, SME versus full. So the integrated questionnaire, as we just reviewed, is the full questionnaire structure. But as many of you know, there is also an SME questionnaire. I want to cover the details on what you can expect in terms of what you may be required to report on and where you might have some flexibility. So this image on the screen shows the boundaries around reporting to the full versus the SME questionnaire. To report to the SME version, your company must meet specific thresholds based on employee count and revenue. They do provide some flexibility with companies that are mid-size to opt into the SME version if they choose, but CDP does not recommend this. Generally speaking, the SME questionnaire is geared towards teams that don't have significant resources to complete the full questionnaire. So they quantify this threshold as companies with less than 500 employees and revenue under 50 million USD. And as you saw in the previous slide, it showed 13 modules associated with the questionnaire. The SME version is much less cumbersome and spans from module 14 through module 21, a mere 7 modules. And it covers a lot less detail to help balance that reporting load on smaller resource teams. So let's dig into the SME questionnaire a little more. For 2025, SMEs will continue to have a simplified set of data points and questions with a major focus on climate change. They will see some relevant questions regarding forest and water security, but only essential questions, and you will not be responding to modules dedicated to these topics. CDP mentions that this idea of forest and water added questions should kickstart SME disclosure journeys on these environmental issues, which may or may not indicate that they will start to score on these issues moving forward for SMEs. But for now, scoring really focuses on company risk and opportunity identification and disclosures, governance, business strategy, and the climate change environmental performance. The 2025 SME questionnaire will not include sector-specific content or variation, non-critical water security, forest content, plastics and biodiversity content will not be included, and the SME questionnaire is not aligned with frameworks and standards. So if you are interested in aligning CDP reporting to your other reporting requirements, it may be worth opting into the full questionnaire. And just a note to requesters that SMEs being requested to respond by a supply chain member, you will receive the same supply chain questions that a full responder will receive. So the quality and data for requesters will be consistent regardless of questionnaire being completed. All right, let's chat through what you can expect as a full questionnaire responder. Now, there's a lot more nuance and specificity in the full questionnaire, and it will be customized to your company and sector. So the climate change questionnaire is required. Plastics and biodiversity modules will be within your questionnaire as well, even though they aren't scored. And forest and water security may or may not be in your questionnaire and depends on meeting specific criteria. So on that note, I want to go into more detail. Some of you may have noticed last year that you had forests and or water security modules in your questionnaire that you were just not expecting to be in there since you were not requested to report on these environmental issues or you didn't opt into reporting on them. I know we heard some surprise clients about this last year, so we want to spend a few moments on this to ensure companies are aware of the changes CDP implemented last year with the integrated format on this topic. So one of CDP's major system changes last year included identifying company potential impacts on forests or water through their CDP industry impact classification assessment. They partnered with independent researchers to do an impact severity assessment in which they could identify specific industries that are likely creating impacts on forests or water, and then cross-reference this to specific companies under their activity classification system, and adding these relevant environmental issues to the reporting portals of if these specific criteria is met for those relevant companies that have that potential to have impacts on water or forests. So for forests, they assess 200 business activities through the activity classification system to identify any associated activities with deforestation in a value chain from production or use of specific commodities where those activities could have the potential to cause detrimental impacts. So these commodities include palm oil, timber products, cattle products, soy, and natural rubber. For water security, they go through a similar process to assess 200 business activities to assess the potential water security impacts in the value chain activities. Both the forest and water security assessments will consider the severity and an activity revenue threshold to identify if your business should be included to report on these topics. So if you are seeing either the forests or the water security modules in your questionnaire, then CDP believes that your business activities have significant enough potential to impact forest systems through the protection or use of those relevant commodities, or that your business has enough potential to impact water security somewhere in your value chain. So for more information, there is a guidance on the CDP industry impact classification. It's available on CDP's website. They go through a list of CDP industries, activity groups, and the activity within the impact classification result. We're also here to be partners in this journey. If you have questions, want to talk to a human, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to support. All right, I want to roll into our first poll of the day. And just to get a brief overview, we want to understand from our listeners if you are planning to report to CDP this year. So we'll give a few seconds on this.
Great. And while we're waiting for folks to answer the poll, it looks like we do have a few questions that have come in. Here's one. Will the reporting requirements apply to firms based outside of the USA, but who export consumer products into the USA? So CDP doesn't have any geographical or jurisdictional applicability in the sense of requiring companies in a certain country to report or not report. It is a global environmental reporting system. And in fact, companies utilize CDP across 130 countries. So if you are asking this question, maybe you've been, requested to report by a customer, you know, that might be where you're kind of falling in. Many companies who are importing, exporting across the US and other jurisdictions are reporting to CDP.
Awesome. We'll probably respond to a few questions throughout the questionnaire, but thank you for responding to our poll. It looks like about 34% of folks are looking to report to the full integrated questionnaire, which is great. About 13% will be reporting to the SME. 19% are not sure yet. So, take a look at those thresholds on reporting. And think about, if you want an integrated format that aligns with reporting. I think that's the biggest consideration for choosing. And then a couple people are not sure or not planning to report. So thanks for joining us and responding. All right, we'll now move forward and really dig into the scoring methodology. And so we can hopefully give you all some clarity on how to improve your scores in this section. But to start off our discussion, I want to speak on the major scoring changes for 2025. The first one to flag is that the essential criteria will be getting a facelift. The essential criteria is a key component to scoring that was integrated into the scoring methodology last year. They previously had this, but only at the A-list level scoring. So last year they integrated into more levels of scoring. The intent of incorporating this is essentially to ensure that companies that are reporting have a more standardized set of data points at specific scoring levels. where they're really focusing these changes for essential criteria are on the forest and water security modules, just to add extra guidance to that process. The second key scoring change to note is more of an FYI. CDP is now planning on publicly reporting financial services sector scoring activities for forest and water security. This is aimed ultimately at further incentivizing disclosure and action from the financial sector on these specific topics. And then the final major scoring change actually is another FYI update. So this year, CDP will continue to score SMEs up to a management level. So the highest potential score SMEs will receive is a B, which is the same as last year. CDP recognizes that SMEs can contribute a lot to environmental issue disclosures, even though they are smaller. So CDP is planning to assess last year's and this year's results for SMEs to create a plan for higher level scoring in future years. But no changes this year to that. So before we review details on the scoring methodology, I want to first highlight some important basics. For companies where you may land in multiple sectors based on your activities, while you'll likely see questions aimed at each of those relevant sectors, you will only be scored on your primary sector assignment. The second thing to note here is while the questionnaire is integrated, climate change, forests, and water security are all scored separately. So there's different scoring methodologies, requirements, and essential criteria for each of these environmental issues. Biodiversity and plastics does remain unscored this year, as we mentioned earlier. However, with CDP's aim to help drive action, I anticipate it won't be much longer until they do start scoring this. So the sooner you start responding to these modules, it's going to set you up better for success once these items do start getting scored. Scoring levels remain the same as previous years on an A through F scoring basis, and we'll dig into more of that in a minute. And then just flagging again, you must meet that essential criteria at a given scoring level to be eligible to meet that specific score level through the scoring methodology. Lastly, just wanted to note that if you opt to submit your CDP response privately, you will not be eligible for an A score. Only public submissions have this potential score available to them. Okay, so everyone is now wondering, how do I score an A? Well, the scoring is built up from the bottom up. So let's walk through it. Starting at the base level expectations, if you are requested to disclose via CDP through a customer or other supply chain member and choose not to, you will receive an F, which tends to stand for failure to respond. Scores do get publicly posted, so if your competitors notice this, you may be seen as an easy way to point to potential leads or partners that you're not doing as much as maybe they are doing. So don't be too hasty to dismiss these requests. The next level up is the disclosure level, or a D score. If you respond to the questionnaire, you will at least get a D. The main focus here is on completeness of your disclosure, so the scoring isn't getting too detailed on what you're reporting on, but it recognizes that you did report. The next level up is awareness, or a C score. The C scoring companies are taking the next step in environmental issue management by comprehensively evaluating the various environmental issues you are reporting on. So evaluation of your environmental impacts, emissions, water uses and discharges, deforestation impacts are all examples of things you could evaluate. So when you start evaluating your impacts, this is how you start developing future-looking impact reduction planning, which moves us into the next level up to management level scores, or B scores. So this is when CDP starts to really look at your governance structures, policies, initiatives for longer term planning, like towards a 1.5 degree future, deforestation goals in your value chain, or through plans to eliminate value chain water impacts. The topmost score is leadership, or A scores. This final achievement is scored when a company shows clear actions towards implementing environmental issue reduction activities. So not only do you have the governance set up as shown by meeting management level scoring, you also are showing progress in your plans. So this score level also highlights high achievers to their A-list, which are the top scoring companies that also meet the A-list level essential criteria. So the thing to know about CDP scoring is that it builds on a foundation for the next level. So for example, if you complete the disclosure and score 49% or below, you will end up with a D minus. If you score 50 to 80% at the disclosure level, you will receive a D. And if you score above 80%, you at that point will be eligible for awareness level scoring. And so it kind of takes this tiered structure up the chain. So the same thresholds will be scored at the awareness level. And then if you reach above 80% scoring at the awareness level, you'll be eligible for management scoring. So management and leadership scoring are unique. They're a little bit different than disclosure and awareness scoring, where they integrate a weighted score through categorization of your questionnaire. So it's a little bit more complex to add in a little bit of extra emphasis on topics that are important to meet for that management or leadership scoring. Okay, so let's move on here. So if you take anything away from this presentation, take the information on this slide. First and foremost, ensure you're meeting that essential criteria. So similarly to the scoring methodology, essential criteria builds your score capabilities from D to A scores. To improve your scores, you will need to be strategic in implementing a plan over time to ensure your company can integrate these strategic data points. So what is essential criteria? So it's a criteria set for each environmental issue. And please note that essential criteria documents are separate from the scoring methodology documents, so don't miss them. It's a unique requirement for key questions throughout the questionnaire, and the criteria is set at a scoring level. So it won't be for every question, but the point is that CDP wants to standardize essential data points for each scoring level. So the good news is that there are no essential criteria points at the disclosure level for any environmental issues. So if you miss all of them, you can at least still score a D. For climate change disclosures, essential criteria starts at the awareness level. And so before you can become eligible for awareness level scoring, you must meet the essential criteria. For forest and water, essential criteria doesn't start until the management level. So if you miss all of the criteria on those issues, you could potentially still score a C. Category weighting is another item that if you're feeling confident that you should be reaching a higher level score, you may want to pay attention to the category weightings to comprehensively understand your highly weighted questions and sections. Relevancy also matters to reporting on details on a given environmental issue. So while the questionnaire is integrated, if you're required to report or opt in to report on multiple environmental issues, each issue is scored separately. So this means that if you are reporting on both climate change and forests, when addressing a question that has a table and asks you identify a relevant environmental issue in each row, you should be addressing at least one row for climate change and one row for forest, and you should have clearly relevant responses for both. Leave no blanks. This is a big one. If you choose not to disclose on an answer, you often will be scored 0 out of a really high denominator just for leaving a blank. I was reviewing the methodologies and I saw one as high as 0 out of 21 for not disclosing. So this is especially pertinent to the environmental performance modules like climate change or module 7, where they're asking for specific data points related to criteria that they find important. Just a basic note on scoring methodology that you will not be scored on questions that are not relevant to you. So for those that have reported, you probably recognize that there's some dependencies related to questions. So if you are answering a question and it triggers another question to show up for you, you will be scored on both those questions. If you answer a question and no other questions show up, you won't be scored on those questions that don't show up. So it's essentially just creating a really customized report based on your company and the responses you're providing. I want to highlight a few scoring insights by environmental issues next. So across all three of these environmental issues, CDP wants to see aligned reporting to your financial statements. So this could include having the same annual cycle for your reports, so January through December, or having financial statements be looking at the same boundary conditions of your environmental assessment. So if you're using an operational control boundary on your greenhouse gas inventory, CDP also wants to see the same control boundary on your financial statements. For climate change, we have a couple items that have consistently come up as things not to miss. This includes greenhouse gas emissions reporting, which is really becoming a baseline expectation. For mid-tier scoring, having a complete scope 1, 2, and 3 greenhouse gas inventory and base year is standard. We're also seeing the scoring levels become more strict year over year on what you are doing about your emissions. So for higher level scoring, you must have inventories verified and have reduction targets. For forests, the items to pay attention to are that each disclosed commodity will be scored separately. So don't leave any commodities out of those integrated tables that are relevant to your business activities. Supportive data points are also really critical for higher level scoring under forests. So if you have commodity information by volume, this is usually better than just product quantity. And then if you own, manage, or control land, providing produced commodity by volume, or if you're not the producer, knowing who does produce is becoming seen as also an essential prerequisite for higher level scoring, since this does help with transparency in the supply chains. Last note here on forests is to have clearly developed policies and targets to work towards no conversion or no deforestation activities. Having these will definitely add a boon to your score. And then finally, for water security, CDP really wants to see accurate water use by companies. They see this as a way to support greater supply chain transparency to water-stressed activities in the value chain. This means they want to see regular measuring and monitoring of water use. And then also recognizing water-related risks across your value chain is also flagged as really important, especially if there are processes that have the potential to pollute somewhere in your value chain. So if you haven't completed a water impact assessment, this would definitely be recommended to improve future year scores. And then preparing for future year reporting, it's always a good idea to do this. And so I wanted to highlight that even while plastics and biodiversity are not scored, these topics are likely going to continue to be more and more present in international reporting regulations and standards. So plastics are, of course, a really important topic, especially when considering marine life and water resources. Similarly, biodiversity is a large concern with deforestation and pollution activities. So don't get caught off guard in reporting on these topics as they become more mainstream. Okay, before we wrap into our last section, we want to do another quick poll and just understand where are people at? Where do you anticipate you want to score this year? We're looking to, be able to understand better like how we can support you and what information to provide in future webinars. So we'd love to understand, what level of detail we could help provide.
Great. And Stephanie, I'm just looking at the time. We're at 9:45, and so we've got 15 minutes to kind of wrap up and go over any questions. So I think we can give this poll maybe just a few more seconds for folks to go ahead and participate if they'd like to, and then we will wrap up probably close to the top of the hour, and we'll kind of try and get to this through the last section as fast as possible for folks that only have an hour. All right, we can go ahead and end.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Great. So our last section that we want to walk through today is a roadmap to scoring improvements, so we can help you to achieve your goals. So CDP, obviously, we have an annual CDP disclosure cycle. So CDP reporting is, if nothing else, a mechanism to support your year and the environmental actions you're contributing to. So step one, you'll want to ensure that you're paying attention to those key dates we shared earlier, and that CDP posts every year on, when guidance is coming out, when reporting is due, and all of those good things. We are currently at step one on this timeline. So at this stage, if you haven't started updating your greenhouse gas or water inventories or commodity evaluations, is a really good time to start. You'll also want to gather any updates from your teams on governance mechanisms, policies, initiatives, develop targets, or action plans. Of course, if you feel like you want some help to help navigate through all of the, scoring documents, or if you just need a few extra hands, this is really the best time to reach out to consultants. We are here to help you. We know the details of reporting to CDP, and so we can take the time to dig into those. Reporting is the next step. And then after reporting is where I think the real work really tends to start. You'll want to assess your reporting gaps, figure out where you might be missing key details to reach higher level scores, or for making more progress on your environmental goals. If you do have a multi-year sustainability strategy, you'll want to consider this. Sustainable change doesn't happen overnight. And when you invest the time to develop strategies and action plans, you'll see progress in your environmental reductions, and that will help improve your CDP scores moving forward. So in performance planning and actions are key areas to spend time on a year-over-year basis, and you'll likely want a good strategy to move you forward with that. Also, if you're just tired of looking at the thousands of pages CDP releases every year, reach out. This is what consultants are here for. This is our bread and butter. We take the time to look through that, so you don't have to. So don't hesitate to reach out if you feel like you would like support. And just one last note on this slide, it's not a one and done process for reporting. Continuous improvement, multi-year planning is really going to help you stay or become leaders in environmental action and the reporting space. So one last slide before I pass back off to Bonnie. We just wanted to emphasize that strategic roadmap development. CDP is not the only reporting or rating structure out there, and it's likely that you're looking at multiple channels of reporting. So developing a multi-year plan to standardize your reporting across given frameworks and regulations coming out, it'll save you a lot of headache. And, I know a lot of you are looking at the upcoming requirements for the California laws, SB 253 and 261, as Bonnie mentioned earlier. And, CDP is truly aligned to some of these laws. And so by reporting to CDP, you're already like miles ahead of those that have not reported to CDP for compliance with these laws. So good on you. Continuing to develop that strategic roadmap will only help. Again, SCS is here to support you in your journey wherever you are and to reach your future state goals. So I'm going to pass the baton back to Bonnie to close this out and hopefully get to some of your questions.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. And it looks like we've got about 10 minutes to the top of the hour. And so we do have a little bit of time for questions. We do have some of our CDP services that we offer, really offer a couple of different ways to support you. So if you are looking at the 2025 reporting cycle and it looks to be quite a lot to take on, including 500 plus pages of scoring methodology guidance to kind of digest and incorporate. We are here to support. And then we can go ahead and shift over to questions. This last slide is really just an overview of, kind of the overall 4 pillars that SCS Consulting Services offers to our clients and some of the core, the core specific services and offerings within those. And it looks like we do have a few questions, and there's certainly time for folks to ask a few more. So let's go ahead and jump into the questions. And just waiting for, let's see, the panel to kind of push those forward. Let's see, I see a question here around the scoring collapse of 2024. So yeah, there was kind of a across the board reduction. The scoring collapse of 2024 seemed to happen across the board. Should we expect lower scores this year, even if we were doing the same thing as last year? So if you, let's say you reported last year, you might have gotten a C 2 years ago, and suddenly your score turned to a D, or in some cases, maybe it went from a B to a D. Because CDP is communicating this year that they're not making as many changes, and certainly the changes are based on kind of like clarifying. What might have happened with your score decrease is that you might have in prior years been able to get a higher score, but in 2024 you were missing some of that essential criteria that Stephanie was referring to. And so if nothing has changed, then what that tells me is that you might not be meeting the essential criteria this year. So I would say kind of digging into it a little deeper is what you'd want to do. And what Stephanie pointed to around kind of like mapping out and understanding those gaps at the beginning of the reporting cycle, that's something that we help our clients to do as we're getting started on reporting. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of really great questions in here. Some of the more specific ones asking about whether you'll receive certain scores given certain criteria. We can plan to follow up with you specifically so we can double check the criteria points in the methodology. Happy to kind of help you out there. There's one question here. We do not publicly disclose financial data and are not publicly traded. How do we align financial reporting if we don't give that information out publicly? So I'll just make a quick note here that there's a couple questions that just ask, what are the, the dates of your reporting cycles? Are they aligned? And so without even like giving the specific numbers, you can still indicate that your reports are aligned. And if there's any indicators that you are willing to share on that topic, then do so. There may be, usually the scoring methodology will indicate that you will receive higher level scores if you are adding in those financial numbers. And so that's a risk if you're not adding in those financial numbers. But if you're not planning, if you don't want to disclose those, then you don't have to, but it will affect your score.
Great. And I'm seeing one here around the topic of kind of the sector classification and really the activity classification for companies that might be surprised to see water or forest modules added. So as Stephanie talked about, this is kind of done at the sector level and isn't specific to your company. And so the question is if you're able to kind of like opt out if it doesn't apply to you. We have supported companies last year to successfully petition CDP to remove those modules where it just didn't apply to their specific business, even though it looked like it applied to their sector. So while I'll say it is possible to do that, it may just be something that might need some third party help in doing. And that is an area that we've supported clients. Additionally, have supported clients to petition around reassessing the scores that they received. And so that's additionally a process, which I just want to mention because of the overall dynamic that folks experienced last year around some surprises around reduced scores. It looks like we've got just a few more questions here. Here's a really simple one. Is there a cost to disclose? So when you do get into the CDP portal and kind of, fill out your company's background information, you will be prompted to pay a fee to use the system. And so every company disclosing will pay that fee to CDP. And in terms of telling you what exactly that cost is, there's a range of costs. So you'll be able to kind of see that as you get into the system and start moving through that process.
I'll also add a note there in the beginning, kind of onboarding into the portal section where you're indicating which fee you're going to pay. There are questions regarding your revenue. When you place that revenue number into that area, when you're just logging in to see your questionnaire, that information is not disclosed publicly or in the reports. And so this is just a way for CDP to kind of classify which questionnaires are going to be relevant for you. And likely that's indicating the specific industry classification you're going to be responding to. And so those like theme requirements that might pop up for you for forest or water will probably be referencing that to show up in your portal or not. We have a question in here regarding that topic as well. Including like a data center as a category for water security and forest impact assessments. I actually looked up the specific information the other day. So while forest impact assessments are not rated highly for data centers, they are for water security. So if you meet a specific revenue threshold, you're likely to see water impact, water security question modules in your report. And that threshold, I believe it's something like 100 million or something. Well, we can follow up on that, but there's specific revenue thresholds identified in that industry impact classification guidance that you can reference.
Great. And then it looks like one more question. Are SMEs able to receive a B even if they do not provide their scope 3 emissions or verification? So B is the highest level that an SME can receive. And so not providing scope 3 emissions is going to be a big part of the scoring. So really for SMEs to achieve a B, they're going to be really comprehensively like taking off the box of the questions within the questionnaire. If you are the person, asking this question and you're, looking to report this year under the SME module, we can support with a gap assessment to kind of help you understand exactly a little bit closer where you might land. And then, of course, work with you to really maximize the scoring potential with the actions and the activities that you have taken. So that's some of the immediate work that, is done in the first year of engagement. And then, of course, we can work with clients like, let's say, for this company in particular, let's say you fall in a D, but it's your ambition to achieve, did I say D? You fell in a D. It's your ambition to achieve B. You're really going to need that roadmap and understand like how to get there along a time frame that makes sense for your organization. It will include comprehensive scope 3 emissions and it will include verification. Great, we are at time, and I just want to thank everybody who has stayed on to the end of the webinar, and really a special thanks to our CDP guru, Stephanie. Thank you so much for all the valuable information that you've shared today. And we do have a quick survey, so please do stay on, and we'd love to just get your feedback on the webinar and hear from you on areas that you'd like us to cover in the future. Thank you so much.
Don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much.